This beach is private. People like you don't get in here. The words hit first, before the ocean breeze, before the salt air. They landed like a slap across the morning calm, sharp enough to make heads turn. At 9:12 a.m., under a cloudless sky where the sun painted the water gold, those 9 words cracked the stillness wide open. Malik Jordan froze mid-step on the gravel path leading to the gate, plain white tee, navy shorts. Worn sandals could have been anyone, but to the guard in mirrored sunglasses, he wasn't anyone. He was not welcome. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was loaded, buzzing like live wire. Even the waves seemed to hesitate, rolling soft against the rocks as if waiting for what would happen next. Malik didn't flinch. He'd heard these words before in boardrooms, in restaurants, in first-class lines, but they still had weight, the kind that sinks deep, the kind you never quite forget. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Malik. The guard shifted his stance, hand resting on his belt like he owned the horizon. Turn around, sir. Guess only beyond this point. Malik held out his laminated pass, paid for, legitimate, valid. The guard glanced once, smirked, then flicked it back like trash. Passes like that don't get you in here. You can't afford this place. The words lingered in the humid air, heavy and deliberate, behind the guard. A young tourist stopped mid-step, phone angled discreetly toward the scene, recording. She mouthed to her friend, "This isn't right." Malik breathed slow, controlled, his voice calm enough to unsettle the man trying to unmake him. "You didn't even read it." The guard leaned closer, tone clip, rehearsed. "We keep standards. We don't need troublemakers wandering in." Troublemaker. Malik almost smiled at the memory. It dragged up a 16-year-old boy told the same thing at a public pool. A 21-year-old man hearing it at a property auction. Decades later, billionaire, global real estate mogul, same word, same weight, different uniform. The guard's radio crackled, his voice low but sharp, unverified guess at the private beach gate. "Might need backup, for a man holding a paid ticket and a calm face." The ocean still rolled in. Seagulls still circled overhead. But the air wasn't quiet anymore, it was thick, humming, waiting for the storm about to break. And Malik Jordan silent, steady, unblinking when planning to step back. Not this time. The guard's radio still hissed in his palm, the static biting at the morning air. "Unverified guess at the private beach gate. Might need backup," he repeated, louder this time. Like saying it twice could make it true. Malik didn't move. The laminated pass hung loosely in his hand. Edges bent where the guard had flicked it away. The path behind him was empty. He'd come alone on purpose. No assistant, no tinted SUVs, no press. Just a man and the ocean he'd wanted to walk beside for one quiet hour. Now even that was under negotiation. From the corner of his eye, he caught the young woman with the camera bag still filming. Lips pressed tight, recording every syllable of the exchange. Her friend whispered something about how this doesn't look right, but neither stepped forward yet. Witnesses, silent but awake. Malik let that silence hold a beat longer, then drew a slow breath, his voice level. "I paid for access. I'm walking through." The guard snorted, weight shifting to one foot, posture swelling with borrowed authority. "Money doesn't buy you a place here. We keep this beach clean exclusive." Exclusive, Malik's jaw tightened. At 16, they'd said members only when they locked him out of a country club pool he'd already paid for. At 22, buying his first strip of rental property, they'd called his bid unrealistic. Told him men like him didn't own land, they worked it. Decades later, same flavor, different packaging. Another voice cut in, an older man in a linen shirt, clearly a guest of the resort, approaching from the boardwalk. "What's going on here?" he asked, eyes flicking from Malik to the guard. "Just keeping things in order," the guard said quickly, straightening as if caught. "He's not on the list." Malik held up the crumpled pass again, Your list is wrong." Before the man could reply, a second guard jogged over, radio still clipped to his shoulder. "Problem?" he asked, scanning Malik up and down like inventory gone bad. "He doesn't belong here," the first guard replied. "Doesn't belong." Those words landed heavier than the heat beating down from the sun. Malik stayed rooted, feet in the gravel, breathing steady. Inside, a different heat burned the kind that had fueled every late night. Every deal closed against odds stacked by prejudice. He let that fire settle low, controlled, because rage never built an empire, strategy did. The second guard stepped closer, palm hovering near Malik's chest like a barrier waiting to be pushed. "Sir, we can't let you pass. Management says guests only. If you don't leave, we'll have to escort you off the property." Behind them, the young woman finally raised her voice, shaky but clear. "He showed you a pass. You didn't even check it." Heads turned. A family walking past slowed to watch. The crowd wasn't big, but it was growing, and it had ears. Malik glanced at her briefly, a silent nod of thanks, then turned back to the guards, his voice still calm, cut sharper than theirs. "You've made 3 mistakes already. First, you ignored the pass. Second, you assumed I don't belong. Third," he stepped closer, "just enough to make them blink. You think you can decide who deserves this view? You can't." The first guard scoffed, but the second hesitated, eyes flicking to the watching tourists. The narrative was shifting, just a fraction. Malik let the moment breathe. The ocean whispered beyond the gate, but the tension on this path felt louder than the waves. Malik's phone buzzed in his pocket, a vibration only he felt. One message from his assistant, "All set, acquisition papers ready for signature." He slipped the phone back silently. This wasn't the time to reveal cards, not yet. He lifted his gaze to the guards, steady as stone. "I'm not moving." The air tightened, thick and electric. A line had been drawn, not in sand, but in silence. And Malik Jordan had no intention of stepping back across it. The second guard's hand hovered closer now, as if a single wrong breath from Malik would justify the contact. The path to the beach had narrowed into a stage, every witness and audience member leaning forward, sensing the next act was about to play out. The ocean roared softly behind the locked gate, a reminder of what was being denied. "Sir, final warning," the first guard said, voice louder now, bolstered by the small crowd. "Turn around before this gets ugly." Malik's eyes stayed on the horizon beyond the metal bars, calm waves, white sand, freedom. Then his gaze shifted back, unblinking, landing on the guard's mirrored lenses. "You think it isn't ugly already," he said, voice low but carrying. A ripple went through the onlookers. The young woman with the camera whispered to her friend, "He's right." A manager finally arrived, summoned by the radio call. Tall, sunburned, polo shirt stretched tight. He strode toward the gate with a swagger that spoke of unchecked authority. "What's the issue?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew who the problem was. "Unauthorized guest," the first guard answered quickly. "Claims he has access." The manager glanced at Malik's plain clothes, the bent pass in his hand, the lack of designer logos or entourage. He didn't look at the pass for more than a second before scoffing. "We're not running a charity. This section of the island is for paying guests only." "I paid," Malik said evenly, holding the pass closer this time, almost forcing the man to see it. "And I'm telling you it's fake," the manager snapped, snatching it from his hand. He barely glanced before tearing it clean in half, letting the pieces flutter to the gravel like litter. Gasps erupted from the small crowd. The young woman filming muttered, "Oh my God, he just ripped it up." Malik didn't move, didn't blink. His breathing stayed steady even as memories flashed sharp and unwanted. A teenage boy watching a lifeguard toss his ticket into the dirt. A young man seeing his signed lease ripped up by a landlord who decided he wasn't the type they wanted. Decades had passed, billions earned. But here it was again. Same script, same hands, same arrogance. The manager stepped closer, invading Malik's space. "You need to leave now before we involve the police." That word hung heavy in the air. Police. A few witnesses shifted uncomfortably, whispering to one another. Malik's silence stretched long enough to pull every eye toward him. Then, slowly, deliberately, he spoke. "You called me a liar, tore up what I paid for, threatened me for standing here. That's 3 choices you made. Let me give you one more." He leaned forward just slightly, voice like steel under velvet. "Step back, while you still can." The guards glanced nervously at each other, unsure now. The young woman filming raised her voice again, bolder this time. "We all saw that. He had a ticket. You destroyed it," her friend chimed in. "This is discrimination, plain and simple." Other murmurs of agreement rippled through the onlookers, small but growing. The manager waved a dismissive hand toward the crowd. "Mind your business. We know how to handle trespassers." Malik's phone vibrated once more in his pocket. A message. "Lawyers on standby. Acquisition team ready. Say the word." He didn't reach for it yet. Instead, his gaze swept over the guards, the manager, the gate they were defending like a throne. And for the first time that morning, a faint smile curved his lips. Because what they didn't know and what they were about to learn is that no gate on this island would stay closed to him for long. Not today. Not ever again. He straightened, every inch of his posture calm yet commanding. A quiet power settling over the path. The crowd hushed, sensing a shift they couldn't name. Malik Jordan wasn't just holding his ground anymore. He was preparing to take the entire ground they stood on. The manager's last words still hung in the humid air when Malik finally moved not back, not forward, just enough to straighten his shoulders and meet every staring eye around him. The morning sun caught on his face, calm, but edged with something sharper than anger. Something that made even the guards hesitate. "You've made your position clear," Malik said quietly, voice steady enough to cut through the murmurs of the onlookers. "Now let me make mine." Before anyone could answer, he slipped his phone from his pocket and tapped a single contact. The line clicked instantly. "Jordan," came a crisp voice on the other end. "Initiate blue protocol," Malik said, tone calm, but threaded with steel. "Finalize acquisition. Immediate execution." "Understood, sir." His assistant replied without hesitation. "Documents are ready. Transferring to your tablet, title deed within the hour." The manager blinked, confused, masking it with a sneer. "What is this? Some kind of show?" Malik pocketed the phone, his gaze fixed, unwavering. "No show," he said simply. "Just business." The crowd murmured louder now, curious, confused. The young woman with the camera whispered to her friend, "Did he just say acquisition?" Her phone stayed steady, lens capturing every word. The first guard shifted uneasily. "Sir, if you don't leave, we'll call the police." Malik stepped closer, closing the space between them without raising his voice. "Go ahead," he said, "but make sure you tell them you're calling on the man buying the island you're standing on." A stunned silence followed. The manager let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Buying the island? Right. If that's true, why are you out here begging to get in?" Malik didn't blink. "Because I wanted to see how you treated people you thought had nothing." That landed heavier than any threat could. Even the second guard's expression cracked, uncertainty flickering behind the mirrored sunglasses. The young woman filming let out a quiet, "Wow." The weight of Malik's words settling over everyone listening. The manager tried to recover, voice rising, brittle, empty words. "You don't belong here. Never will." Malik's phone chimed in his pocket. A notification flashed on the screen he deliberately pulled out and held up so they could all see. "Acquisition confirmed. Ownership transfer pending signature. Immediate access granted." The crowd collectively inhaled, a ripple of disbelief and awe passing through them. Malik's voice stayed low but carried like a verdict. "I told you in not moving." He glanced at the gate, then at the men blocking it. "But you are. Because as of now, this beach, this gate, this island are mine." The first guard stepped back instinctively. The second froze, unsure whether to salute or apologize. The manager's face drained of color, his earlier bravado curling into panic. Witnesses began whispering louder now, some clapping softly, phones held higher. The story already spreading beyond the sand and sky above them. Malik didn't raise his voice, didn't boast. He just looked at the men who had tried to erase him and said, calm and final, next time you tell someone they don't belong, make sure they don't own the ground you're standing on. The hush that followed was louder than any wave crashing against the shore. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the steady pull of the ocean. Waves rushing in and out like a clock counting down to something irreversible. Malik stood still at the gate, phone lowered at his side. His eyes locked on the three men who had spent the last 20 minutes convincing themselves he didn't matter. Now, every heartbeat between them seemed to stretch thin under the weight of his words. The manager swallowed hard, trying to claw back authority. You're bluffing, he muttered. But the tone wasn't the Samite had lost his armor. Malik didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned slightly, scanning the growing semicircle of onlookers. Phones were raised higher now, filming, live streaming. A truth too many had seen before, too many times, now had witnessed in this time. It wouldn't vanish into silence. He looked back to the manager, voice measured but ringing clear over the hushed crowd. Bluffing doesn't change ownership records. And as of 5 minutes ago, this island is under my name. He glanced at the torn pass on the ground, fragments scattered like proof of arrogance. You didn't just refuse me access. You denied humanity at a gate that now belongs to me, that won't be forgotten. The first guard shifted, clearly uncomfortable, and finally lowered his hands from his belt. The second took a subtle step back, eyes darting between Malik and the onlookers, unsure which side to stand on anymore. The young woman with the camera spoke up again, louder now, her voice cutting through the tension. We all saw what happened. He showed his pass. You ripped it up. You threatened him for no reason. Others began murmuring agreement, a chorus rising, yeah, we saw. That was wrong. This isn't how you treat people. For the first time, the men at the gate weren't just facing Malik, they were facing the room. A crowd that refused to look away. The balance of power shifted, subtle but certain. Malik hadn't raised his voice once, but the truth had grown teeth around him. He stepped forward just enough that the sunlight drew a sharp line across his face. Calm, steady, deliberate. From today, this beach will never turn anyone away for the color of their skin, the clothes on their back, or the money you assume they don't have. This island isn't yours to guard anymore. The manager opened his mouth, closed it again. Whatever excuse he was reaching for had drowned in the weight of reality. Malik's phone buzzed once more, a final confirmation flashing on the screen. Title deed executed. Ownership transferred. He turned the screen outward so everyone could see it. No shouting, no theatrics. Just proof undeniable. A ripple went through the crowd, gasps and low murmurs blending with the sound of the waves. Malik bent down, picked up the torn pieces of his ticket, dusted them off, and placed them in the manager's trembling hand. His voice was soft, but it carried like thunder. This is what prejudice costs. Learn from it before it costs you more than a job. The path to the beach was clear now, no one daring to stand in his way. Malik walked past the open gate, his steps slow, deliberate, each one echoing louder than any apology they'd failed to offer. Behind him, silence reigned, not peaceful, but heavy. A shame the camera stayed up, ensuring the world would hear how one man bought back more than sand that day. He bought back dignity for everyone who had ever been told, you don't belong here. Malik didn't rush once he crossed the gate. He walked as if each step claimed the ground twice once for himself, and once for everyone who had ever been told to turn back. The sand beneath his sandals was warm, soft, but every grain felt heavier than the silence still clinging to the men behind him. The crowd hadn't dispersed. Phones were still up, recording his quiet victory, the kind that didn't need shouting to be heard. A few feet down the path, Malik paused. The ocean stretched endless before him, calm and untouchable. But he knew this moment couldn't end here, not with just his own freedom to walk this beach. Justice meant more than a gate opening for one man. It meant closing doors on behavior that had been allowed to stand for far too long. He pulled out his phone again, tapped a different contact. The line clicked on immediately. "Carla," he said, voice smooth but carrying the weight of command. "Yes, Mr. Jordan," came his assistant's clear, unwavering reply. "Effective immediately. Terminate existing management contracts for this island staff. I want an internal audit on every reported complaint in the last 5 years. Pull security records from today. Full review. Start now." "Understood. Start executing protocol," Carla answered, her tone professional but laced with quiet satisfaction. Malik ended the call and slipped the phone away. Gaze fixed on the horizon for a moment before he turned back. The manager, pale and stiff near the gate, was frozen under the weight of a dozen cameras pointed straight at him. The guards shifted, uncertain, like men realizing their authority had just turned to smoke. Malik walked back a few steps, closing the distance until his shadow stretched long across their feet. His voice was calm, deliberate, every word a verdict. "From this moment, you no longer work here. Your names will be logged, your access revoked, your authority stripped. You won't decide who belongs on land you don't own ever again." The manager's lips parted, but no sound came. Behind him, the crowd murmured louder, some clapping softly, others calling out good. And about time. The truth had gathered momentum, unstoppable now. Malik looked directly at the young woman who had filmed the entire ordeal. "Thank you for speaking up," he said, voice lower, warmer. "What you did matters." She nodded, visibly moved, whispering back, "Someone had to." Then Malik addressed everyone present, his tone carrying a message meant for more than just this beach. "What happened here today is what happens in too many places. Doors close not because you can't pay, not because you don't have the right, but because someone decides you don't look like you belong. That ends here, on this island, for good." He reached for the gate himself and swung it open wide, the metal groaning under the gesture. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone watching. This wasn't just an entrance, it was a boundary being rewritten. Malik stood there, looking back one last time at the men who had tried to erase him. His voice was quiet but carried across the sand, sharp as a blade. "I didn't buy this island for exclusivity. I bought it to end exclusion. And from today forward, no one else will hear the words you said to me this morning." The waves rolled in behind him. Applause rose from the crowd, and for the first time since dawn, the ocean breeze felt light again, not just for Malik, but for everyone watching a gate stay open that had been slammed shut too many times before. The applause faded into the sound of waves, a rhythm steadier than any heartbeat on that stretch of sand. Malik stood a few feet from the shoreline now, his hands in his pockets, letting the breeze wash over him. But even as the salt air softened his expression, the moment wasn't over, not for him, not for anyone who had watched what unfolded at the gate. The crowd lingered near the entrance, unwilling to leave, tourists with phones still raised, murmurs rolling like low thunder between them. Some looked shaken, some proud, all changed. In their eyes, Malik could see a quiet recognition that this wasn't just about a beach pass. This was about every invisible line ever drawn to keep someone out. Malik turned back toward them, his footsteps leaving deliberate marks in the sand. The manager still stood stiff by the gate, a ghost of authority stripped bare, face pale and tight. The guards stared at the ground now, their mirrored sunglasses doing little to hide the shame beginning to settle on their shoulders. Malik stopped a few feet from them, voice low but sharp enough to slice through the humid air. "Let me tell you what happens next." The murmurs died instantly. "By the end of this day, every contract tied to this island's management will be terminated. Every complaint you buried, every ticket you tore up, every person you turned away because they didn't look like the right kind of guest. It will all surface, and it won't just be this gate you lose. It will be the gates you thought you'd guard in every other job after this one." The manager flinched at that, lips parting as if to argue. But no words came. Malik stepped closer, his presence towering though his voice never rose. What you did to me today, you've done before, and you thought you'd keep doing it. Because people stay silent. Because they leave when you tell them to. Because they believe you own the space they already paid to walk on. He glanced at the onlookers, his gaze sweeping across every phone, every witness, making sure his words reach beyond this beach. I'm not leaving, and neither will this truth. It stays here, with you, for everyone watching. The young woman with the camera spoke up, stronger now than before. You're right. I've seen this happen to others too. We just didn't think anyone would stop it. Malik looked at her, nodding once. Today, it stopped. He pulled his phone out again, tapped Carla's contact. The call was on speaker this time. Every word deliberate, public. Carla, mark this date, effective immediately. Rename this island Horizon Haven. No more private gates. Access will be open to all paying visitors, no matter who they are or how they look. Done, sir. Carla's voice came crisp and unwavering through the line. Press release drafted. Legal documentation updated. Live within the hour. Malik ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket. His last words to the men at the gate were quiet, final, echoing like a verdict under the wide morning sky. This land will remember what you tried to do today, and so will everyone else. He turned, walking toward the water, each step carrying the weight of a promise sent it just to himself. But to anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong where they had every right to be. And as the sun climbed higher, the cameras kept rolling, ensuring the story would travel far beyond the horizon now under his name. The tide had crept closer, lapping at Malik's sandals, but he stayed rooted at the shoreline, staring out at the horizon like he was writing something new across it. Behind him, the murmurs from the gathered crowd ebbed and flowed, low but charged, like thunder still rolling in the distance. Carla's confirmation echoed in his mind. Horizon Haven, open access, immediate reform. It wasn't just a name change, it was a line drawn in history, turning one morning's insult into a permanent promise. Malik turned slowly, facing the crowd again. The onlookers hadn't left. A quiet solidarity had formed in the sand, strangers standing shoulder to shoulder. Phones lowered now, watching not just a CEO but a man turning decades of indignities into action. He walked back toward the gate, each step deliberate, until he stood a few feet from the men who had tried to erase him an hour ago. Their earlier bravado was gone, replaced by uncertainty and the heavy realization that their power had been temporary, borrowed, and now revoked. Malik's voice was calm, unshaken, but there was no mistaking the authority in every word. For years, you've stood here deciding who gets to touch the sand, who gets to see this view. Today, the gate fell because you tried to slam it on me. He glanced at the torn pass still clutched in the manager's hand like evidence. That couldn't be thrown away. Tomorrow, it stays open because I refuse to let what happened here happen again. The young woman who had filmed earlier raised her voice from the crowd. We needed to see this. People don't believe it happens until it's caught on camera. Malik looked directly at her, nodding once, firm. The camera shouldn't have to save anyone. Justice should meet them at the gate before the phone even comes out. Whispers of agreement rippled through the onlookers. A chorus of yes and exactly weaving into the ocean breeze. Malik shifted his attention back to the men at the gate. This morning, you thought you had authority. But authority isn't a uniform, and it isn't a title. Authority is earned by the way you treat people. And today, you've lost every ounce of it. He pulled out his phone one final time. Dialing a number on speaker, the line clicked, and a deeper voice answered. Mr. Jordan, transfer confirmed. Island deeds secured in full. How do you want to proceed? Effective immediately, Malik said, his tone like steel wrapped in velvet. Suspend all current management. Security badges revoked. New staff will be appointed under Horizon's equity policy. Send termination notices and arrange escorts off the property before noon. Understood, sir. Executing now. The manager's face drained of color completely. One guard took a slow step backward. his chest rising with a shaky breath. Malik's final words cut sharper than any raised voice could. I didn't come here for revenge. I came for a walk on the beach. But what you tried to deny me this morning, you'll never deny anyone else again. That's the difference between power and leadership. Power pushes people out. Leadership tears the gate down. He turned, not waiting for a response, and walked back toward the water. Behind him, the gate stood open, a man stripped of prejudice. The crowd began to clap, not the polite kind, but the raw, cathartic sound of justice witnessed in real time. And over it all, the ocean sank steady and free, as if the island itself exhaled in relief. Malik stood at the water's edge, his reflection trembling in the shallow tide as if the island itself was still processing what had happened. The morning sun had climbed higher, brightening every face behind him, witnesses who hadn't left, who couldn't leave, not yet, because what they'd just seen wasn't just a man buying an island. It was a shift, a crack in a system that had long gone unquestioned. The gate creaked in the distance, still open, unmanned now. The manager and his guards lingered awkwardly near the post, stripped of the power they'd worn like armor an hour ago. Phones kept recording, not for virality, but for proof that accountability could happen in real time. Malik turned back toward the group, every step steady, each one erasing the footprint of humiliation that had been pressed into this sand before. When he spoke, his tone was low but carried like a current pulling every ear toward him. "You came here for peace," he said, eyes sweeping across the bystanders. "And you watched a gate try to decide who deserves it. That gate's gone now. But remember, what happened here doesn't stop with me. You don't need billions to stand your ground. You just need to know you have the right to." A man in the crowd spoke up, voice rough with emotion. "We've all seen it before. We just never thought someone would face it head on like this." Malik nodded once, gaze firm. "I've seen it my whole life, at 16, at 21, at 43, different gates, same story. And every time I stayed quiet, someone else paid for that silence later. Not anymore." He glanced toward the manager, who still clutched the torn remains of Malik's past like a verdict no one could erase. Malik's voice sharpened, each syllable deliberate. "You thought this morning would end with me walking away ashamed. Instead, it ends with you walking away unemployed, because prejudice has a cost. And today, you paid the down payment on it." The manager's lips moved, searching for words that wouldn't come. One of the guards lowered his gaze completely, a visible tremor in his shoulders as the crowd's judgment settled heavy on his back. Malik pulled out his phone once more, pressing a single button. Carla's voice came through instantly. "Yes, Mr. Jordan. Prepare statements for public release. Make sure every local outlet knows what happened here today. Include footage from witnesses willing to share. I want this story hard not for me, but for every person told they didn't belong here before." "Understood. Drafting now," Carla replied, her tone crisp, resolute. Malik slipped the phone away and took one last look at the gate, now nothing more than an empty frame against the sunlight. Then he turned to the crowd, his final words carrying more weight than the title deed he now owned. "I bought this island for its beauty, but today, it gave me something far greater, a chance to tear down a wall built on arrogance and bias. Let this beach be proof that silence isn't safety, and dignity doesn't need permission." The onlookers began to applaud, louder this time, not just for Malik but for a truth long overdue. And as the waves crashed behind him, the sound merged with clapping hands, a rhythm of justice reclaiming its rightful place on the shore. The applause rolled over the beach like a second tide, rising, falling, then holding steady in a way that felt less like celebration and more like release. Malik stood still for a moment, letting it settle, not feeding on it, just recognizing the weight behind every clap. These weren't cheers for wealth or power, they were for justice finally meeting the daylight. He walked back toward the gate, deliberate, every footstep a reminder that this morning had started with him being told he didn't belong. Now, the same path marked his ownership, his claim not just on land, but on the truth of what had happened here. The manager finally spoke, his voice small, brittle. Mr. Jordan didn't know who you were. Malik stopped, met his gaze squarely, and answered without hesitation. That's the problem. You thought you needed to know my name to treat me like a human being. The words hit harder than any raised voice could. The crowd fell silent, phone still up, documenting what real accountability sounded like. One of the guards shuffled forward, eyes low. Sir, I just followed orders. Malik's expression didn't change. And how many times have you followed orders that turn people away for no reason but prejudice? He let the question hang, heavy, unanswerable. Silence doesn't make you innocent. It makes you part of it. No one dared speak after that. Malik pulled his phone again, called Carla. This time on speakers so every ear could hear. Carla. Final directive. Security footage from this morning archive. Every biased action, every false accusation, every word you said it goes to legal. Immediate investigation for discrimination and misconduct. Understood. Cert HR and legal teams are already en route. Their access badges are disabled. No return without clearance. Malik ended the call, slid the phone into his pocket, then looked at the three men who had tried to erase his right to stand on his own property. His tone was calm, but final, the kind that didn't leave room for negotiation. Your time here is over. Security from my team will escort you off this island before noon. You will not speak to any guest. You will not touch a single pass. You will not close another gate on anyone again. The manager's shoulders sagged. A man realizing too late that arrogance was no shield when the truth had receipts. Malik turned, addressing the bystanders one last time. If anyone here has ever been refused entry, questioned, or humiliated on this beach, you'll be contacted directly for restitution. Horizon Haven isn't just an Amita promise. What you saw this morning will never happen here again. The crowd responded with quiet applause, heavier than before, some faces wet with tears, some fists raised in solidarity. Malik stepped closer to the gate, now standing wide open, and rested his hand on the weathered metal. A gate should keep danger out, not dignity, he said softly, letting the words linger in the warm air. And as long as I own this land, it never closes on anyone who belongs here, which is everyone who comes with respect. The ocean roared behind him as if in agreement, carrying his words far past this strip of sand, far past the horizon now bearing his name. Malik remained by the open gate, one hand resting on the weathered metal, eyes sweeping the sand as if memorizing every footprint left in this morning's confrontation. The weight of it wasn't just personal anymore. It felt generational. Every second carrying echoes of doors slammed shut on others who never got the chance to push back. The former manager shifted uneasily, a broken version of his earlier bravado. Sir, we didn't mean harm, he muttered, voice small, almost lost under the steady hush of the waves. Malik turned his head slowly, his tone low but cutting. Harm doesn't care about intention. It cares about impact. And today, your impact told a room full of strangers that worth could be judged in seconds, by skin and clothes alone. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. One of the guards spoke up, quieter than before. We were told to keep standards to keep the beach exclusive. Malik took a step toward them, his presence calm yet undeniable, a force that made them look down at their own boots. Exclusion isn't a standard. It's a stain, he said, voice rising just enough to reach every witness still standing on that path. And from today, this island stops pretending it's luxury to lock people out. He pulled his phone one more time, pressing Carla's number. The call was on speaker again. Deliberate, public, Carla, final action, release public statements globally. Horizon Haven will operate under an open access policy for all guests, effective immediately. Bias audits will be mandatory for every hire. And anyone carrying prejudice in their job won't keep it here or anywhere under my name. Confirm, Mr. Jordan. Carla's voice came crisp through the line. Compliance teams are boarding helicopters now. By sundown, this island will run under your directives only. Malik ended the call, his eyes never leaving the three men who had stood as gatekeepers an hour ago. What you did this morning will be documented, investigated, and remembered, but not for revenge, for reform, so no one else walks the same path and hears what you told me. The young woman who had filmed everything stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. We'll share the footage. People need to know what happened here. Malik gave her a single nod, gratitude in his gaze but steel in his words. Share it, not for me. For every person told to leave a place they had every right to enter. Let them know the gates open, know when it stays open. The crowd broke into applause again, louder this time, unfiltered, cathartic. Some people raised their phones higher, others just stood still, soaking in the moment, knowing they had witnessed more than a transaction of property. They'd seen a shift in how power speaks, how it answers BS not with shouting, not with pleading, but with truth backed by action. Malik turned toward the ocean one last time, his final words carrying like a vow over the sand. This isn't about owning land. It's about owning the narrative they tried to write for us. And as long as I stand on this island, no one else gets written out of it again. The waves crashed harder on the shore, almost like applause from the sea itself, sealing his promise into the tide forever. The crowd began to thin as the sun climbed higher, but no one left without a final glance at the gate that had started it all. It no longer looked like a barrier. It stood open now, unmanned, a frame against the bright horizon, proof that the morning had ended differently than it began. Malik stayed near the water, letting the waves roll over his sandals, his eyes distant yet sharp, as if he was carving the day into memory. This beach had once tried to erase him, but now every grain of sand carried his promise, never again. Carla's voice buzzed softly through his phone speaker. Mr. Jordan, compliance teams have landed. The former staff are being escorted to the mainland. Press outlets have confirmed coverage within the hour. Horizon Haven is trending globally. Malik let the words sink in, but his expression didn't shift to pride or satisfaction. This wasn't victory. This was correction, long overdue and still unfinished. He spoke calmly, knowing Carla would understand. Make sure the footage from witnesses is preserved, unedited. Every word they used against me today should be heard, and every promise I made here should be recorded. Horizon Haven isn't just a resort anymore. It's an example. Let's make sure it stays that way. Understood, sir, Carla replied, firm as steel. We'll establish a permanent guest equity office on the island. Staff will be trained personally by diversity leaders you approve. Malik ended the call, finally turning back toward the path. The young woman with the camera was still there, hesitating like she wanted to say something. He approached, his presence warm now, far removed from the sharp edge of earlier hours. Thank you, she said quietly, for not walking away. Most people just leave, even when they're right. Malik gave a faint nod. I used to walk away too, he admitted, voice low, carrying the weight of years. But silence doesn't protect you. It just protects the people doing the harm. I had the power to change this today. I couldn't waste it. She swallowed, eyes shining. You changed more than just today. Malik glanced at the open gate, sunlight spilling through like a new dawn. That's the goal, he said softly. Change the moment, change the system, leave the door open for everyone after you. He took one final walk along the beach, the crowd now dispersing. The once hostile staff escorted away under the watch of his incoming team. The tension that had hung over the island that morning had lifted, replaced by something lighter, not celebration, but possibility. When Malik reached the far end of the shore, he turned back, eyes on the gate once more. The same place where a man had tried to deny him entry now marked the start of something bigger than ownership. It marked a promise. His final words that day were quiet, spoken to no one and everyone at once, carried away by the sea breeze. They said I didn't belong. I made sure no one else will ever hear that on this island again. And with that, Malik Jordan walked toward the horizon, leaving footprints on sand that, from this day forward, would remember dignity instead of denial.